The street lamp flickered, casting jagged shadows across Ethan's face as he slumped against the fence, an empty whiskey bottle dangling from his hand. I stood frozen on my porch, the summer air thick with the scent of cut grass and something heavier, something unspoken. His eyes, dark and hollow, locked onto mine, and in that moment, I swear he saw through every wall I'd ever built. My name's Caleb, 24, fresh out of college and back in my hometown of Asheville, North Carolina, crashing at my mom's old house until I figured out what the hell I was doing with my life. Ethan lived next door, a married man in his mid-30s, the kind of guy who mowed his lawn every Saturday and waved politely but never lingered. His wife, Laura, was the picture of suburban perfection, blonde, poised, always hosting book clubs or charity drives. They were the couple everyone envied, until you noticed the way Ethan's smile never reached his eyes. That night, I'd been restless, pacing the porch with a cigarette I didn't even want, when I saw him. He was alone, sitting on the curb outside his pristine colonial-style home, the bottle glinting under the streetlight. Something about the way he sat, shoulders hunched, head bowed, made my chest tighten. I should have gone inside. I should have minded my own business. But then he looked up, and his gaze hit me like a punch. It wasn't just loneliness in his eyes. It was hunger, raw and desperate, like a man starving for something he'd never named. I flicked my cigarette into the grass and crossed the street before I could talk myself out of it. "Rough night?" I asked, keeping my tone light, though my heart was hammering. Ethan's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "You could say that." His voice was low, rough from the whiskey or something else. He tilted the bottle, peering into it like it might hold answers. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life, Caleb?" The question caught me off guard. I leaned against the fence, close enough to smell the liquor on his breath. "Yeah," I admitted. "More than I'd like." He chuckled, a bitter sound. "You're young. You've got time to fix it." He looked at me again, and this time, the air shifted. His eyes lingered too long, tracing the lines of my jaw, my shoulders. I felt exposed, like he was seeing parts of me I hadn't even shown myself. I'd known I was gay since I was 15, but I'd kept it quiet in this small town where gossip spread faster than wildfire. Ethan, though, he was married, straight, untouchable. Yet here he was, looking at me like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. "Want to talk about it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, but he didn't look away. "Talking's not what I need right now." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't sure I wanted to unpack. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This was dangerous territory. He was married. He was my neighbor. But the way he was looking at me made it impossible to walk away. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the image of Ethan sitting there, broken and unguarded. I started noticing things I hadn't before, the way he'd linger in his driveway, glancing at my house like he was waiting for something. The way Laura's laugh sounded forced when they hosted their weekly barbecues. The way Ethan's hands shook when he poured his coffee in the mornings, like he was carrying a weight no one else could see. One evening, I found him in his garage, tinkering with an old motorcycle that looked like it hadn't run in years. The air was thick with the smell of oil and metal, and he was shirtless, sweat glistening on his broad shoulders. I hesitated at the entrance, my excuse about borrowing a wrench feeling flimsy. "Hey," I said, stepping inside. "Need a hand?" He looked up, startled, then softened. "You know anything about bikes?" "Not really," I admitted, grinning. "But I'm a quick learner." He laughed, a real one this time, and handed me a rag. Wiped down the frame. I'll talk you through it. We worked in silence for a while, the clink of tools and the hum of cicadas filling the space. Every now and then, our hands brushed accidental, or maybe not. Each touch sent a jolt through me, electric and terrifying. I told myself I was imagining things, that he was just being friendly. But then he'd look at me with that same starving gaze, and I'd lose my grip on reason. "You're good at this," he said after a while, his voice soft, keeping things steady. I met his eyes, my throat tight. "Not as steady as you think." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "Caleb," he said, my name sounding like a confession. "What are we doing here?" I didn't have an answer, but my body did. I reached out, my fingers grazing his arm, and for a moment, the world stopped. His breath hitched, and I thought he'd pull away, but he didn't. He leaned in, just a fraction, and that was enough to unravel me. That night, we didn't kiss. We didn't cross that line. But we stood there, inches apart, the air crackling with everything we weren't saying. I went home shaking, my mind a mess of want and guilt. Ethan was married. He had a life, a wife, a reputation. But the way he looked at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life made me wonder if I was the only one falling. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and half-spoken truths. I'd catch Ethan watching me from his window as I mowed the lawn, his silhouette framed against the morning light. My heart would race, torn between the thrill of his attention and the dread of what it meant. I told myself to stay away, to keep my distance, but every time I saw him, my resolve crumbled. One afternoon, Laura invited me over for one of their barbecues. The backyard was crowded with neighbors, kids running through sprinklers, the smell of grilled burgers thick in the air. Ethan stood by the grill, flipping patties with a forced smile, while Laura chatted with her friends about the latest PDA fundraiser. I lingered near the cooler, nursing a beer, trying not to stare at him. "You look like you're hiding," a voice said, and I turned to find Ethan standing behind me, a plate of burgers in his hand. His eyes were softer today, but the hunger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. "Just not big on crowds," I said, forcing a shrug. He nodded, like he understood more than I was saying. "Come with me," he said, jerking his head toward the house. "Need help grabbing some ice?" I followed him inside, the noise of the party fading as we stepped into the cool, quiet kitchen. He didn't go for the ice. Instead, he leaned against the counter, his hands gripping the edge like he was anchoring himself. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice barely audible. My breath caught. "Ethan, you're married." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes tortured. "I know, and I hate myself for it. But when I'm with you, I feel alive. For the first time in years." I wanted to tell him to stop, to go back to his perfect life, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stepped closer, my hand hovering near his. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought he might break. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." Before I could respond, the back door swung open, and Laura's voice cut through the tension. "Ethan, we need more buns," she called, oblivious to the storm brewing between us. He stepped back, his face a mask of composure. "Coming," he said, grabbing a bag of buns from the counter. But as he passed me, his fingers brushed mine, deliberate and fleeting, leaving my skin burning. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment, every touch. I knew I was playing with fire, but the pull was too strong. Ethan was trapped in a life that didn't fit him, and I was the only one who saw it. Or maybe I was just fooling myself, seeing what I wanted to see. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was simple, written in Ethan's messy scrawl, "Meet me at the lake. Midnight." My heart pounded as I read it, knowing I should tear it up, knowing I wouldn't. The lake was a short walk from our neighborhood, a quiet spot where kids fished during the day and couples snuck off at night. When I arrived, Ethan was already there, sitting on a fallen log, the moonlight glinting off the water behind him. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said, almost surprised. "You asked me to," I replied, sitting beside him. The air was cool, the silence broken only by the soft lapping of the water. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared at the lake, his hands clasped tightly together. "I've been lying to myself for years," he said finally, telling myself I could keep it buried. "But then you moved in. And, God, Caleb, you make it impossible to keep pretending." I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. "Pretending what?" He turned to me, his eyes raw with emotion. "That I'm not in love with you." The words hit me like a tidal wave, stealing my breath. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could do was stare at him, my heart splitting open. He leaned in, his hand cupping my face, and this time, there was no hesitation. His lips met mine, soft and urgent, and the world fell away. The kiss was everything, fire and ache and 1,000 unspoken promises. But as we pulled apart, the weight of reality crashed back. He was married. He had a life I could never be part of. And yet, as I looked into his eyes, I knew I was already too far gone to turn back. The kiss lingered on my lips for days, a ghost I couldn't shake. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt Ethan's hands on my face, his breath against mine, the way he trembled like he was breaking apart. But with the memory came the guilt, sharp and relentless, cutting through the haze of want. I avoided him after that night at the lake. I'd see him in his driveway, washing his car or carrying groceries, and I'd duck inside before he could catch my eye. But Asheville was small, and our street was smaller. There was no escaping the pull between us, no matter how hard I tried. One evening, I was at the local coffee shop, scrolling through job listings on my laptop, when Ethan walked in. He froze when he saw me, his jaw tightening. For a moment, I thought he'd leave, but he ordered a coffee and slid into the seat across from me. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. I closed my laptop, my hands shaking. "There's nothing to say, Ethan." We crossed a line. His eyes darkened. "You think I don't know that? You think I'm not tearing myself apart over this? Then why are you here?" I snapped, louder than I meant to. A few heads turned, and I lowered my voice. "You've got a wife. A life. What do you want from me?" He leaned forward, his hands gripping the table. "I want to be honest for once in my damn life. I've been running from mess since I was a kid. I married Laura because it was what I was supposed to do. But you make me feel like I'm not drowning." His words broke something in me. I wanted to hate him, to tell him to go back to his perfect life and leave me alone. But the truth was, I was drowning too. I'd spent years hiding who I was, afraid of what this town would think. And now, here was Ethan, tearing down every wall I'd built. "I can't do this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I can't be the guy who ruins your marriage." He reached for my hand under the table, his touch warm and steady. "You're not ruining anything. I've been broken for a long time." We sat there, his hand on mine, the world outside fading away. I knew we were treading dangerous ground, but the thought of letting him go felt like losing a part of myself. Over the next few weeks, we found ways to see each other, quiet moments stolen in the shadows. A late-night walk by the lake. A quick coffee at the shop when Laura was at work. Each time, the tension grew, the line between right and wrong blurring until it was almost invisible. One night, we ended up in my backyard, hidden by the tall hedges that separated our houses. Ethan was quieter than usual, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Laura's starting to notice," he said, his voice heavy. "She asked me why I'm so distracted." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "But I can't keep lying to her. It's not fair." I nodded, though every part of me screamed to keep him close. "So what do we do?" He stepped closer, his voice barely audible. "I don't know. But I know I can't lose you." We kissed again, harder this time, like we were trying to hold on to something slipping away. But as his arms wrapped around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. The weight of our secret grew heavier with each passing day. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if Laura found out? What if Ethan chose her? What if he didn't? Every scenario ended in heartbreak, but I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Ethan started coming over more often, always when Laura was out. Book club, yoga, charity meetings. We'd sit on my couch, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in a small town like this one, where being different wasn't an option. He'd known he was attracted to men since high school, but he'd buried it, convinced himself he could live the life everyone expected. I thought if I just followed the script, marriage, house, kids, I'd be okay, he said one night, his head resting on my shoulder. But it's like I've been holding my breath for years. I ran my fingers through his hair, my heart aching. "And now?" He looked up at me, his eyes searching. "Now I'm breathing." Those moments were everything, but they came at a cost. I started noticing the strain in Ethan's face, the way he'd check his phone constantly, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Laura wasn't stupid. She'd started asking questions, dropping hints about his late nights, his distracted demeanor. One afternoon, I was in my front yard, pulling weeds, when Laura appeared at the fence. Her smile was tight, her eyes sharp. "Caleb," she said, her voice too bright. "You've been spending a lot of time with Ethan lately." I froze, my hands buried in the dirt. "Just neighbor stuff," I said, forcing a smile. "Helping with the bike. You know." She nodded, but her eyes didn't soften. "He's been different. I thought maybe you'd noticed." My stomach twisted. "Different how?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Never mind. Just keep an eye on him, okay? He's going through something." I nodded, my throat tight, and watched her walk away. The guilt was suffocating now, a constant weight on my chest. I loved Ethan. I hadn't said it out loud, but I felt it in every fiber of my being. But loving him meant hurting her, and that was a truth I couldn't escape. That night, Ethan came over, his face pale. "She knows something's up," he said, pacing my living room. "She didn't say it outright, but I can feel it." I stood, my arms crossed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe it's time to tell her." He stopped, his eyes wide. "Tell her." "Caleb, that would destroy her." "And what about you?" I shot back. "You're destroying yourself, living like this." He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be honest without tearing everything apart." I sat beside him, my hand resting on his knee. You don't have to do it alone. He looked at me, his eyes glistening. I don't deserve you. I leaned in, kissing him softly, but the moment was cut short by the sound of a car pulling into his driveway. We froze, our eyes locked. She's home early, he whispered, panic creeping into his voice. Go, I said, my heart pounding. We'll figure this out. He nodded, slipping out the back door, but the fear in his eyes stayed with me long after he was gone. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk. Ethan and I were careful, meeting only when we were sure Laura was occupied. But the secrecy was eating at us both. Every touch, every kiss felt stolen, tainted by the knowledge that we were betraying someone who didn't deserve it. One night, Ethan showed up at my door, his eyes red-rimmed. She confronted me, he said, his voice breaking. She asked if I was having an affair. My heart stopped. What did you say? I denied it, he said, his voice barely audible. But she didn't believe me. She kept asking why I'm so distant, why I don't look at her the way I used to. I pulled him inside, closing the door behind us. Ethan, this can't go on. You have to make a choice. He looked at me, his face a mask of pain. I know. But every time I think about telling her, I see her falling apart, and I can't do it. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see that he was tearing himself apart too. But instead, I took his hand, pulling him close. You can't keep living a lie. Not for her. Not for anyone. He buried his face in my shoulder, his body shaking. I'm scared, Caleb. I've never been this scared in my life. I held him, my own fear clawing at me. I'd fallen for him, hard and fast, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. But the thought of him staying in a marriage that was killing him was worse. The next day, I saw Laura in her front yard, planting flowers. She looked up as I passed, her eyes cold. Caleb, she called, her voice sharp. Can we talk? My stomach churned, but I nodded, following her to the porch. She sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I know something's going on with Ethan, she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. And I think you know what it is. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. She deserved better than lies. Laura, I don't. She cut me off, her eyes glistening. Just tell me the truth. Is he in love with you? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to run, to hide, but her gaze pinned me in place. I don't know what he feels, I said finally, my voice shaking. But I care about him. A lot. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I thought I could fix him, she whispered. I thought if I loved him enough, he'd be happy. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I'm sorry, I said, the words feeling hollow. I never meant to hurt you. She stood, wiping her eyes. Just take care of him, okay? He's not as strong as he thinks he is. I watched her walk back to the house, my heart breaking for her, for Ethan, for all of us. That night, I waited for Ethan, knowing everything was about to change. Ethan didn't come over that night. Or the next. I saw him in passing, his face drawn, his eyes avoiding mine. The silence was deafening, each day stretching into an eternity of doubt. Had Laura told him about our conversation? Had he made his choice? On the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I marched across the street, my heart pounding, and knocked on his door. Laura answered, her face pale but composed. He's in the garage, she said, stepping aside. I found Ethan sitting on a stool, staring at the motorcycle we'd worked on together. He didn't look up as I approached. "She knows," he said, his voice flat. "She's known for a while." I sank onto the floor beside him, my knees weak. "What happens now?" He shook his head, his hands trembling. "She wants me to stay. She says we can work through it, that we can go to counseling." "And what do you want?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He looked at me, his eyes raw with pain. "I want to be free, but I don't know how." I reached for his hand, my heart aching. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm here." He pulled away, standing abruptly. "I can't keep doing this to her, Caleb. Or to you. I'm hurting everyone I care about." "Then stop hurting yourself," I said, my voice breaking. "You deserve to be happy, Ethan. We both do." He turned away, his shoulders shaking. "I need time," he said finally. "I need to figure this out." I nodded, though every part of me wanted to beg him to stay. "I'll wait," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "But not forever." The next few weeks were torture. Ethan kept his distance, and Laura's car was gone more often than not. Rumors started swirling, neighbors whispering about trouble in the perfect marriage. I stayed out of it, focusing on my job search, trying to rebuild the life I'd put on hold. One evening, I was on my porch, sketching in a notebook, when Ethan appeared. He looked different, lighter. Somehow, like a weight had been lifted. "I told her," he said, his voice steady. "I told her everything." My heart stopped. "And?" "She's leaving," he said, his eyes glistening. "She's going to stay with her sister for a while. We're done." I stood, my sketchbook falling to the ground. "Are you okay?" He nodded, a small smile breaking through. "For the first time in a long time. Yeah, I think I am." We stood there, the space between us charged with possibility. He took a step closer, his hand finding mine. "I don't know what happens next," he said, "but I know I want you in it." I pulled him close, my heart soaring. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a promise. The weeks after Laura left were a strange mix of freedom and fear. Ethan was still in his house, but it felt empty without her. He'd started packing her things, boxing up years of a life that no longer fit. I helped when he asked, but mostly, I gave him space. He was grieving not just the marriage, but the version of himself he'd tried so hard to be. We spent more time together, no longer hiding in the shadows. Late night talks on my porch, walks by the lake, quiet moments where words weren't needed. But the town was watching. Asheville might have been progressive in parts, but our street was a bubble of tradition, and whispers followed us everywhere. One afternoon, we were at the coffee shop when a group of Laura's friends walked in. Their eyes narrowed as they saw us, their whispers cutting through the hum of conversation. Ethan tensed, his hand tightening around his cup. "Ignore them," I said, my voice low. He shook his head, his jaw tight. "They think I'm the villain. Maybe they're right." "You're not," I said, my hand brushing his under the table. "You're just being honest." He looked at me, his eyes softening. "How do you do that? Make everything feel okay?" I smiled, though my heart was racing. "I just know what it's like to hide." That night, we ended up at my place, sprawled on the couch, a half-empty pizza box between us. Ethan was quieter than usual, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm. "I'm scared," he admitted. "I've never done this before. Been out." I turned to face him, my heart aching. You don't have to do it alone. He kissed me, slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing every moment. I love you, he whispered, the words slipping out like a secret he'd held too long. I froze, my breath catching. I'd felt it for weeks, but hearing it out loud was different. I love you too, I said, my voice shaking. The words changed everything. They made the whispers, the judgment, the uncertainty feel smaller. We were building something real, something worth fighting for. But the world wasn't done with us. The next morning, I found a note taped to my door. The words scrawled in angry red ink, "Leave him alone. You're ruining everything." My stomach dropped. I showed it to Ethan, and his face paled. "This is my fault," he said, his voice hollow. "I should have stayed away." "No," I said, grabbing his hand. "This is us choosing to live. Whoever wrote this doesn't get to decide our story." He nodded, but the fear in his eyes didn't fade. We were free, but freedom came with a cost, and we were only beginning to understand it. The note was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the whispers grew louder, the stares more pointed. Someone slashed Ethan's tires one night, and my mailbox was stuffed with more hateful letters. We reported it to the police, but they shrugged it off small-town drama. They said nothing they could do. Ethan started pulling away, not because he wanted to, but because the pressure was crushing him. I saw it in the way he hesitated before taking my hand, the way he scanned the street before stepping onto my porch. He was trying to be brave, but bravery was harder when the world was watching. One night, we sat by the lake, the same spot where we'd first kissed. The air was cool, the stars bright above us. Ethan was quiet, his hands clasped tightly together. "I'm thinking about leaving," he said finally. "Starting over somewhere new." My heart sank. "Leaving Asheville?" He nodded, his eyes fixed on the water. "This place, it's suffocating. I can't be who I am here." I wanted to argue, to tell him we could fight, but I knew he was right. This town had its claws in us, and the harder we fought, the deeper they dug. "Where would you go?" I asked, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I don't know," he said, turning to me. "But I want you to come with me." The words hit me like a wave, hope and fear crashing together. Leaving meant giving up everything, me mom's house, my roots, the life I'd known. But staying meant losing him, and that was a price I couldn't pay. "Let's do it," I said, my voice firm. "Let's start over. Together." His eyes lit up, a smile breaking through the tension. "You mean it?" I nodded, pulling him close. "I love you, Ethan. I'm not letting you go." We spent the next few weeks planning. Ethan sold his house, and I put my mom's place on the market. We didn't know where we'd end up, maybe Seattle, maybe Portland, somewhere we could breathe. The hate mail kept coming, but it mattered less now. We had each other, and that was enough. On our last night in Asheville, we stood on my porch, the street quiet around us. Ethan took my hand, his grip steady. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For seeing me." I smiled, my heart full. "Thank you for letting me." We left at dawn, the town fading in the rearview mirror. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like freedom. We weren't running from the past. We were running toward a future where we could be ourselves, unapologetically. And as Ethan reached for my hand, the weight of the world lifted, leaving only us, and the promise of a life built on truth.